Hi, welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Neri, and it's Cozy Saturday, which means I'm going to be reviewing a new cozy mystery that I've delved into, and I'm going to give the non-spoiler reviews, the rating, and then a warning and the spoiler review. I'm reviewing Death in the Stacks by Jen McKinley. This is the 8th book in the Library Lovers mystery. So this series follows librarian Lindsay Norris, and in this book, she's getting ready for the annual Bryce Creek Library Dinner in the Stacks fundraiser. And basically, it's their biggest moneymaker of the year for the library. Normally, it's not something that she really has to stress too much about. However, she does have a new president of the library board that's kind of sticking her nose into things. The name of the new president is Olive Boyle, and she kind of has it out for Lindsay and the rest of her library staff. She has a very clear vision of what she wants a librarian to be, and she doesn't believe that Lindsay or even the librarians are up to the standard that she expects. She wants a very mild-mannered librarian, like almost stereotypical. Olive does not like a single hair out of the place of that expectation that she wants, to the point where she actually publicly threatens one of the library's staff members. So when she ends up dead, who are we looking at? Well, that staff member, right? Except, isn't that a little too obvious? One thing I love as a setting in cozy mysteries are libraries, library settings, maybe even some type of profession adjacent to a librarian. So I was really excited going into this. A lot of the characters are really, really lovable, including, of course, based on the summary, our main suspect, Paula, who is the library staff that was threatened by Olive. And this is not only something that's in the synopsis, so it's really not a spoiler, but also it's presented very early in the book. Olive's attitude is a problem. And throughout the book, we get so many glimpses of snippets and conversations of people who are like, yeah, I don't like Olive. I would probably have a reason to make sure that she doesn't have a say in this particular thing that I'm doing. Which is not to say that anybody would go to the extreme of murdering her, but she has been murdered. So let's kind of lay this out, right? You have a library with our main character being the librarian, her staff being pretty close to her. She's got great ties throughout the community. They even talk about, like, quite early on in the book, about her romantic relationships in the series. And because it's the 8th book in, these things have been established, but the way that the author lays it out, even in explanation, makes me really curious about all the previous books and all the things that I had missed during it. So I think I'm going to be tackling this series from the beginning just to catch up to the 8th book where I am now. So that, of course, lets you know I am going to be revisiting this series because I really love it. And I also love Lindsay. I think that she tends to, without a plan and also without any sort of amount of cleverness or wit, says, oh my gosh, I heard something, I have to get into action. But of course, that is the reason why we have so many people in cozy mysteries that are amateur sleuths, and then the people that they care about are like, hey, it does get dangerous, stop doing this. And in the book, in the very beginning, we find that there is hints of that in a previous book as well, where she found herself in a situation that she could not handle, that was very dangerous, that put people that she cared about in danger. And so in this book, she's very reluctant to investigate, and I thought this was kind of a refreshing introduction despite not being the first book. Some negatives, I think that Olive Boyle's meanness, almost to like Regina George levels, was a bit much, especially if we were not going to keep her as somebody in the series. I think she would have been a really good foe for Lindsay and a really good reoccurring character, but she's not, which makes her level of vitriol kind of more comical, almost like a cartoon villain. And since we are not moving on in this series with Olive, it just felt like it was really heavy handed. I also thought that the story took a very convoluted turn. It made the motivations of the actual killer very unbelievable. There were a lot of elements that I felt were really good coming into this sleuthing and the resolution of the mystery. I think the author juggles all of that well. But again, with how muddled I feel about our actual killer's motivation, it's almost as if it should have been solved earlier than it was. Even still, because I like the cast so much, I like their friendships, their dynamics, their encouragement, and I could see myself reading this again. I did rate it a 5 out of 5. I think that the mystery was just fumbled a little bit in the end, but I'll get to it in the more spoilery part of this review. So here is your warning. We're going to get into it right now. Okay, listen, so I like Scooby-Doo, and I feel like every time I mention Scooby-Doo in a mystery that doesn't have to do with Scooby-Doo, though, or it doesn't really, it's not like dealing with the same tropes or whatever, it is such like a red flag for me, because there's something about it that is an element that's off. The things, the elements, the tropes, the things that happen in Scooby-Doo work for Scooby-Doo. They don't work for everybody else, right? But I also just realized I use this, I don't know, comparison a lot because I work as a server, and the servers, some of the servers also like to put on certain playlists in the restaurant, and some of them, you think you're playing something cute and lo-fi and energetic and upbeat. But really, I feel like I'm running around through the Scooby-Doo hallway through different doors as I'm serving tables. Like, anyway, that's a whole different tangent. Listen, what I feel like the element of Scooby-Doo that I'm thinking of is not where it is meant to be. For example, the resolution, basically how they catch the killer, could have been a scheme made up by Fred. And Lindsay and her boyfriend Sully could have been Scooby and Shaggy in that situation. Like, that's how it felt. They had to catch the villain at some point, and there had to be an appearance of the villain, but it was almost too convenient. You're telling me 3 people tried to cram into a window and nobody heard you? Like, let's say Lindsay and Sully, right? They're in this position where they're like, oh my god, we are going to die. So I don't expect them to have noticed or heard that there's this commotion where 3 people are trying to cram into a window. But the killer, given that she was giving this almost lackadaisical monologue where she's telling them how she is going to frame their murder, why wouldn't she notice? If she thought she was so clever through all this time, if the author thought she was creating such a, again, I don't think the motivation really holds that well here, but if that motivation, let's say in theory for this mystery, was supposed to hold water, why wouldn't she notice? It didn't sit right with me. I had to sit with it for a few days and be like, okay, I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed this book so much. But what is this? What is this ending? And then once we get to the story behind it and what Olive did and what ultimately led to her death, I'm like, you cannot want a man this bad to treat him this bad and then think you're gonna get him back a couple of decades and 2 kids later. It's not gonna happen. That poor man and his wife. Also, the reason that she disliked Lindsay was stupid. It made sense, and it made sense for her character because her character was petty. Like, this is why I wish that Olive stayed alive and was a reoccurring character, because she is so mean that dealing with her as a foe as the president of the library board would be an interesting dynamic. Well, we don't get that. So in this book, she does target Lindsay for reminding her of the woman her ex left her for. Your ex had any number of reasons to leave you. You were lucky he was nice enough to stay as long as he did, quite frankly. Oh my god. I love hate this character because I saw the potential and I knew she wasn't gonna make it, but okay. I have some more positives though. With Olive being so mean and her friends also being so mean, and they're called the Mean Girls, like they're nicknamed the Mean Girls behind their back, but they know that that's what they're nicknamed. They just don't say anything about it, which, if you're in a group and people nickname you the Mean Girls, would you say anything about it? I mean, if that is who you are and that is that is what makes you happy, I'm not saying that you shouldn't change. I'm just saying that if a person is calling a spade, maybe you should just accept it. If you know what you're doing is wrong and you continue to do it anyway, you should just accept that people aren't going to look upon you favorably. That's the normal thing, right? So Olive gets on stage during this fundraiser and she is trying to, again, threaten Paula, this time threaten Lindsay. And because Olive has set herself in a position of a lot of power in this town, which is new, all of her power grab is new. You think people would just fall in line, but they don't. They don't like her. Even people who are from out of town are like, hey, they're speaking up, they're making responses to her speech. Like, ma'am, like, we have out of towners from other states or even from overseas, and they're like, hey, this is not okay. Like, not even thinly veiled, where as a stranger, I'm picking up on the absolute animosity that you have. And I met that librarian that you're talking about for the first time today, and I'm still on her side. And they are like talking back to her speech because no single adult in that fundraiser is like, I'm gonna play high school games with you today. And I love it. I love it because I think a lot of times in cozy mysteries, we got the small town setting, a lot of people don't want to ruffle any feathers. And that being said, when you don't want to ruffle any feathers, the person in power, you think that you don't have power against them. And a little scene like this I find is such a gem. I will say I'm not 100% on the ages of these characters, so because I am going to read the series from the beginning, that's fine, but let's say this was my one and only foray into the series. Some characters get described, so you kind of get a relative age range. Lindsay, I don't remember an age range, and Sully, I'm just assuming because he's her boyfriend, he's aged somewhere around her age. But I think given that she is the main character, it probably would have been important to just slip that in somewhere. It would be nice. Also, I love the character of Robbie as her best friend, where they say in the book, like, there may have been a little bit of romantic interest, but when that couldn't work out because Lindsay still loves Sully, they were still able to be really, really good friends. And while Sully is the one who wants to keep her safe and is her support and is so important, Robbie also brings that sense of adventure and curiosity into her life. And also, I'm really confused as to how old he is because he's saying he wants to retire, but he's retiring as an actor. Okay? So if you're a successful enough actor, I suppose that your retirement age is going to look different from everybody else's. But yeah, my verdict is I still want to see this cast again. And this actually seemed to be like this author's version of a crossover episode. So there is a character who comes from England. Well, there's a group of them that come from England. But one of them is a milliner. I saw the word when I was reading it because I was reading it in ebook format. I saw it and my brain couldn't comprehend the word. But this person makes hats. And of course, Jen McKinley also has a series with hats. So I'm like, I want to get that started too. This seems like a huge crossover episode and it's so interesting. So I'm, yes, continuing with this one. I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to go into the hats one. We're going to see what happens. But this does conclude my review. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and I will see you next time. Bye.